My name is Phyllis Francis. I'm an Olympic athlete and a world champion. And I've been a professional athlete for the past 8 years.
What's it like to be a track and field athlete? Like, what goes into being one?
I would say a lot of mental toughness, strength, discipline, because it's not one of those sports where it's like a team sport where you can kind of, if you're lacking in something, you can kind of depend on your other teammates to help you out. It's more so solely just you. So it's you in your own lane and you have to do whatever event you have to do. And it's going to require a lot of dedication and discipline.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendall Wallace, and I am the media coordinator for Project Transition. I'd like to welcome you to our Project Transition interview series, where we sit down with a wide ranging of individuals who once competed in the athletic arena and are now in the professional workforce. Today, I will be interviewing Miss Phyllis Francis. Hello, Phyllis.
Hi.
And Phyllis, before we get started, I would love to have you just explain your background so the audience can know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, my name is Phyllis Francis. I'm an Olympic athlete and a world champion. And I've been a professional athlete for the past 8 years.
When did you start running track?
Ooh, I started, it's getting a little murky, but I started at the tender age of 10.
Do you remember how you got into track and field? Because that's a very interesting sport to get into.
Mm-hmm. Well, my parents wanted us to do sports, something to kind of keep us busy after school. So my father thought that why not soccer? But I hated soccer because you're running for hours and you're getting kicked at. And then they said, you know what, let's try track and field. It's either tennis or track. And I was too old for tennis. So they was like, let's try track, and started off with that. And the rest was history.
What events did you do in track and field?
I ran longer distance. So I did the 8, the 15, the 1,000, the 5,000, and I did a Harlem Marathon.
So for people unfamiliar with track and field, what's it like to be a track and field athlete? Like, what goes into being one?
I would say a lot of mental toughness, strength, discipline, because it's not one of those sports where it's like a team sport where you can kind of, if you're lacking in something, you can kind of depend on your other teammates to help you out. It's more so solely just you. So it's you in your own lane and you have to do whatever event you have to do. And it's going to require a lot of dedication and discipline to make it through. So, and diet as well. But that's also part of the discipline part.
As you got older, how did your relationship with track and field, how did it grow? How did it change? And when did you stop running?
I stopped running this year in March.
Okay.
This March.
So starting from 10 to when you retired, how did your relationship with track change? Because you did it for a while, and it was your first foray into it was, your parents wanting you to do it. But how did your relationship change with it?
Well, when I was a kid, thinking back on it, I thought I was being punished. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm running miles. This sucks. I wasn't winning a lot back then. I didn't really start doing well in track until probably my high school year, mid-high school. So to me, it was just kind of like a chore, like, it's something I need to do. My parents want me to do. As I began to get older, I started to see the opportunities and doors that were opening for me because of the sport, and how I was able to use the discipline and my mental toughness in other aspects in life, in the world, make sure if I have to study an extra hour, I can actually do that, because track mentally trained me like, hey, we got to hit this time, we got to do that. So I used some of those skills to apply to my everyday life. Yeah, so that was high school. And then college, it was more so just seeing the opportunity like, hey, you can actually make this into a profession and you can get the type of exposure most people don't necessarily get. I get to travel the world, I get to meet a lot of people, and I get to sit in meetings with shoe owners and other people that most people don't have access to. So I was really, really, and still am grateful for that. And I would say that's how my relationship changed. And towards the latter years, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for a different challenge in life. I'm ready to do something different. So towards the end of my 20s, that's when I was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. So when you talk about you started to see positive outcomes from it, you start to see, oh, okay, it could do this for me. It could take me here. You went from, being a kid to this is something that you felt like you had to do, like it was a chore. And eventually you started seeing the positive benefits from it. So I'm interested to know what the first instance of that was, or any instance that stands out to you if you have one.
Yeah, I want to say my sophomore year, when I started getting letters from different colleges that wanted me to run for their school, colleges I couldn't even fathom or thinking about. I'm a New York City girl. I was happy with going to University of Michigan or somewhere in the East Coast area, but I'm having places from Texas, all over the country, reach out to me, all because I ran track. So it broadened my horizon to new opportunities and more access to certain places that most people don't really have. As long as I made sure my grades were good and I was running well, the door was always open for me to pick and choose whatever school I wanted to go to. So that's when it started to click, okay, you know what? My parents are actually on something.
At Project Transition, with our mentorship program, one of the main things we want to do is help get the next generation of students into rooms that they've never, dreamt of being in before. We want to get them seeing colleges on tours that they've never seen or heard of before. So for you to get those letters from these schools that, like you said, you never fathomed of even going to or even attending, at that point, do you remember your school, in particular, your school? Do you remember them talking to you about these schools at all? Or was it just more so you were just educated on the schools around you?
I think I didn't want to go anywhere else besides the East Coast. So I was fine with just being in my own little bubble in the area, or at least there on the East Coast. I thought of Villanova or something like that, or like I mentioned earlier, University of Michigan. But when I had other schools reach out to me, and having my parents and I think my guidance counselor talking to me, I think it'd be great for you to just go out there and see the world and learn some new things and experience new opportunities rather than being in your hometown. And I truly think that just even if it's the next town over, the next city over, it's great for young adults, people graduated from high school to just go out there and try something new, because you learn a lot about yourself and the world.
So this was in your high school years.
Yeah.
So at this point, were you interested? Was it decided that you wanted to go to school for athletics, or you at first wanted to go to school for academic purposes?
I wanted to go to school for academic purposes.
And then once you saw the positive benefits of being an athlete and the doors it can open, did that shift, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it did. It did, 100%. Because they were giving me a scholarship. So, and I had the talent. So my parents were like, just go for it. Why not? We've been training you for this. So go.
Like you said, you're a New York girl. So how do you, a New York girl, go from New York to the University of Oregon? What made you decide the University of Oregon?
To be real, I didn't necessarily decide Oregon, which is funny. My parents and my track coach at the time told me to go. And I'm like, Oregon is so far. It's the West Coast. I don't know if I can handle that. But they're like, no, you'll love it. Go there. So they kind of forced my hand with that, which I did not like. But I'm very grateful they did, because I absolutely love Oregon. OMG. But the first year was rough for me, I will say. I remember getting there at the airport. The Eugene airport is a lot bigger now, but it was really small then.
It was very small.
Yeah, very small.
Yeah.
There was no street lights. It was pitch black at 10 p.m. I'm from the city, so I'm used to seeing light pollution and hearing sounds.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that. It's very... Yeah. Oh, wow. I never thought of that. It's very secluded into itself. It doesn't
very
have a
much
lot of
so.
light.
Yeah. So I went from hearing noise and seeing bright lights and everything staying open until 2, 3 a.m., 5 even. I'm like, where's everybody? Are we at the wrong spot? And the coach is like, oh no, this is
Oh,
Oregon, Eugene. I was like, what did I sign myself up for? Oh my gosh. But it turned out to be really great. The people were awesome. The schooling system was awesome. The vibes, the energy, and the people there. It was dope.
so you kind of touched on this with your answer, with the lights and Oregon being so secluded. Because for people who haven't been to Oregon, especially Eugene, where the University of Oregon is, it's track town. It's basically like its own little city, its own little town. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, were there any culture shock moments for you as you were making that transition? I know we touched on it with like the lights and everything.
Yes, there was a lot. One, people were very nice, that's a good thing. But in New York City, I realized we could be a little blunt and harsh, but we say it in the most kindest ways, Over there, they'll say good morning. I wasn't used to people saying good morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? Hello, have a good day today. What's up? Like, oh my God, that was a culture shock. I'm used to, New York City to me is like a melting pot. So you get like Italians, Asians, all of that. And I went from that to just seeing pretty much everybody in the whole entire world just in this very concentrated city to a place where everything is spread out, a lot of greenery and not very much culture, It was predominantly white. Yeah, I was like one of the very few Black people there. So that was kind of a shock for me as well too. And kind of a weird adjustment, but not weird to where it was uncomfortable. It was just like, I wasn't used to just being the token Black girl all the time. After that, I just started to blend right in. I was like, oh, this place is cool. I like it here. People are dope. Yeah. They're friendly. So
very friendly. Very friendly. So you stayed for all your 4 years. During that time, and it can be in your first year, second, third, or fourth, do you have any obstacles that you faced during your athletic career there? I mean, we could talk about the obstacles you faced in your later career, but at the University of Oregon specifically, and you're 18 years old, you're running at one of the most iconic sports schools of all time. Were there any obstacles that you faced there specifically?
I would say just being on my own out there, I had the support of the team, but again, I'm like the freshman's a new kid, just kind of blending in, trying to find my niche and what works for me, adjusting to the program, because I was a distance runner when I went there. So even though I'm a sprinter, I was a middle distance runner. So I ran the 8 and the 15. So I went from high school training where I would run maybe like 10 miles a week to running 30 miles a week. And oh my gosh, that was a shock for me. The training was a lot harder. It was a little bit more intense. I would say between my freshman and sophomore year, I really started to question, like, is track really right for me at this level, at a collegiate level? Because I wasn't really, I didn't find myself very happy doing that. And that's when they decided to put me on with Robert Johnson at the time. He decided to make a deal with me, like, why don't you just be a sprinter? If you can hit this time, then we'll go from there. And I hit it barely, but I did. And he's like, did I make it? He's like, all right, yeah, I'll take you on. I was like, all right. And I never looked back. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So much better. I love it. And that's how I transitioned from a middle distance runner to a sprinter. But those workouts were very challenging being a middle distance runner at a collegiate level, because it's a lot of miles.
They just run.
Yeah.
And also, we should probably just quickly go over this. The difference between a sprinter and a middle distance athlete. Can you just briefly explain that? Because I know that concept may be just a little, for people who aren't fully aware with track like we are, they just think we just go out there and run all day, but there's different levels.
Right.
Do you just want to briefly explain those?
Absolutely. So a sprinter is someone between the ranges of, and I'm going to include indoor season as well, from a 50-meter dash all the way up until 400. But between 2 and 4, they call them longer sprinters,
Yes.
And then you got your middle distance runners where they run the 15, the 600, 800, and 15. Yeah, I want to say that. And then from 15 up, that's like long distance. I'm talking 3,000 marathons. The list goes on.
Yes. And then, like you had mentioned, indoor. So there's a few seasons to take into account. So you kind of touched on this, just saying your first foray into training there, it really made you question, did you have what it takes to participate at the collegiate level? Because that's a big transition to go from high school where there's two levels. There's the most competitive level, but at college, it's pretty much competitive all across the board.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did your mental health how was it affected? Because this was a new reality that you were stepping into, and you were only 18 years old and you stayed there for all 4 years. So how did your mental health kind of change while you were there?
It had some ebbs and flows. There were times where I think it was my sophomore year where I'm like, I'm just going to be a regular college student. This isn't for me. I'm too serious. I'm out. It was just a lot of pressure back then. They don't do it anymore. Now they have new rules. But back then, if you didn't perform well, they will cut your contract. So I remember at the end of the year, they would always have our coach would have 2 sheets of paper, here's your original scholarship and here's the reduced one. What's it gonna be? And I'm like, oh my, it was very stressful with that. But once I figured out what I wanted and what I can do and pretty much what I wanted, what I can do, it made a lot of things easier instead of me trying to do what I think they would want. So I just had to stay true to myself.
A lot of people wouldn't know that. They would just assume, you get your scholarship, you go, it goes however it goes, no kind of consequences or anything. So just to kind of make your point clear, if you weren't performing at the level that they thought you were, you should be performing as an athlete. That could potentially affect your academic career there as well, because you're not just an athlete, you're also a student. So
yeah, absolutely. I don't think they do it so much anymore now. I think a lot of things have changed now that they have this portal that helps athletes just kind of transfer and leave if they need to leave. But when I was going to school, I just remember if I didn't hit the certain times or I didn't perform or win NCAAs or made it on the podium, they will reduce your scholarship.
When did you get to the University of Oregon?
2011.
Okay, 2011. Yeah. So
yeah.
Obviously, some things have changed in recent years. A lot has changed. So yeah, that was the culture in, I would say, 2011. And it's interesting that 2011, even though it's far away, it doesn't seem that far away. It also makes you question, okay, why was this the culture that was being established at these schools? Because yeah, you're an athlete, but you're also a student. Many schools, and I know this, from being in school myself, they have mental health resources. They have counselors you can speak to if you ever feel overwhelmed. So I'm curious, as a student athlete at an institution that is wealthy, I should say, did they have any outlets for you guys to go to in case you needed to talk to anybody about these issues that could have possibly came up?
They for sure did. Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. And did you feel that they were good resources, or did you feel like they were just there?
It's subjective. It just depends on the person. For me, I don't know. I just didn't really feel comfortable really talking to anybody about it because, again, back then it was the norm. If I went to anybody oh, I didn't win this or that, or I didn't hit this time, or I wasn't good at this track meet, they might reduce it. It was just it was a job, we're giving you this, and if you can't perform, then what can we say? So there's nothing I could have, in my mind, say. It was just all right, we need to figure this out.
It was a job. And it also seemed like it was a very transactional relationship. You do this and you get what you get what you get in return. So, and the thing about track is that it really is an individual sport. Even if you are on a relay, and we'll talk about that more because you were on a pretty successful relay, I should say. When you get that baton, it's just you. It's just you. It's just you in that one lane, and you can either make or you can break the race. So did the individual aspect of track ever weigh you down? Was that difficult to handle, especially at that level, because everybody sees you. There's no place to run or hide. If anything happens, it's seen by everybody. So did that ever affect you mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. The anxiety I used to have, especially in college, because, people need to also remember, I'm still I'm a late teen, early 20s. I'm figuring life out. I'm on my own. And now I'm having to perform at this level. And it's not like I'm competing against like other freshmen. I'm competing against seniors that have been doing this, and juniors, just of all, like everybody in college, and some people who transferred who are a little bit older. So I'm having to compete against people that may already have these skill sets, and I'm just figuring myself out. I'm still growing, my body's still forming. So, I was very anxious competing. I didn't really start to calm down a little bit until my senior year, but I was a little stressed out, a little bit.
I mean, it's a stressful situation. I don't think anyone blames you. So before we talk about your later years, because I think this is important, as an athlete at that level, did you feel like you were allowed to talk about your mental health and the struggles you were facing? Because even though you were a college athlete, you were quite visible. There were interviews that went into it. There were press events that went into it. So did you ever feel like you were allowed to talk about what you were dealing or struggling with? Or did you feel like for the sake of the image, you had to keep those feelings close to your chest?
Back then, they didn't really talk about mental health like how they do now. I think it started to come about towards the latter years of my collegiate years. So definitely senior year, that's when we started taking mental health a little bit more seriously. But back then, I didn't really talk about it, but then I didn't even think about it like that either. It was just something like, all right, this is what I have to do. If I perform well, my scholarship gets to be maintained, and then I can go to school and do what I need to do. It was just as simple as that. Everything else was it didn't really matter at the time. Even though I was stressed out and I might have had anxiety for like some of the bigger meets and bigger competition, it wasn't something that I felt the need I had to talk about because it wasn't presented to me like, hey, do you want to talk about this?
So let's touch a little bit about where most people might know you from. So you competed in the 2016 Olympics, and notably you were on the 4x4 relay and you brought home the gold medal winning team. So you mentioned bigger competitions. That's arguably the biggest stage you could be on. So mentally, what was that experience like for you? Do you feel like your experience and time at U of O helped you transition and do that successfully?
Yes, I did. That's one thing I will say about Oregon. It definitely prepared me for a professional life, post-collegiate, I was already just dealing with that little bit of collegiate stress, having to deal with the Olympic stress of it all.
Yes.
I mean, obviously it's stress, but I had ways to cope with it and ways to process it a lot better than how when I was in college, when I'm just kind of figuring out oh, this is new. And it also helps that they have a psychologist on the Olympic team. So if you're having anything or any issues or you feel overwhelmed, you can always talk to somebody. So that's good. And, just talk with your teammates and whatnot. Oregon definitely prepared me for my professional career in the Olympics and whatnot.
And for those who don't know this, you have on your Olympic
yes.
merchandise. So you talked about how Oregon prepared you for your professional career, for your track professional career, but also for the professional career you're in now. So for people who aren't aware, what are you doing right now since you've retired? And just remind us when you did retire as well.
Oh, I retired this March. Ever since then, I've just been working on my cold pressed juices that I sell, Jermont juices. And I'm working on this catering business. It's in the works, but it's looking very good. So
when you did make the decision to retire, was that an easy decision that you came to, because that's a very difficult thing to do. This is something you've been doing since you were 10. And so to come to that decision of, okay, I think I'm done. Was that easy to come to? Were you satisfied with it, or did you struggle with it a bit?
I struggled with it a lot. I struggled with that a lot because, it becomes your identity, becomes who you are. And my body, I just started to notice my body just was breaking down slowly but surely. And And now I'm just thinking about my longevity of my health and what my quality of life will be when I'm older. You know, when people retire from track, I guess when you hit your 30s, they're like, oh my gosh, you're geriatric, you're old, but
it's right. So ageist.
Yeah, I know. But when you go out into the real world, you're still young and you still got a lot more life to live. And I did not want to be walking around having 2 knee replacements and 2 hip replacement surgeries and whatnot before the age of 40. So I really had to sit down with one of my good friends, as you know, Kendall Sasha. I sat down and I chatted with her for a little bit and she's like, try something else. Like, it's going to be okay. So just with my whole little support group and my small circle of good friends, after talking with them, I was like, okay with finally just hanging up the spikes and walking away. Like, it's okay. Cause you're always gonna feel like, I can just do a little bit more. Maybe I can just you're always gonna feel that. That's natural, you know? It has to be a time where I'm just gonna be like, you know what? I'm okay with this. And that's fine.
To go from competing at a big stage like that to now being in a professional setting, mentally, did you feel a bit more relaxed as you stepped into the professional setting? Because that could also be stressful too. Did you feel a bit more relaxed or did you still have a little bit of anxiety?
I still felt a little bit more relaxed. The only difference is that now you're having to you're having to learn how to handle and deal with people in the correct way. With track and field especially, this is such a individual sport. We get a lot of people that and if you're really good at it, they gravitate to you and they focus solely on you. So it's almost like people just kind of fawn over you because oh my gosh, you're a celebrity. But when you go out into the real world, they don't necessarily do that. And there's a way to talk to people and there's a way to carry yourself. And that was something that I'm a very personable person, but I also know like working in certain environments, you know, you can't just operate like you run the business because you got a team of people and you got to communicate with them and whatnot. Like, don't forget about everybody else now.
It's a whole process.
It is a process. So that was really interesting and that was something cool to learn. But the whole anxiety, I don't really get nervous like about stuff like that. If someone's like, oh, you got to give out a presentation, it doesn't really bother me as much as it, because I'm like, girl, you ran the Olympic stage.
That's a great point because track is so individual. You get used to, I guess, you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, I should say. You get used to people watching your every move. You get used to people seeing what you do in real time. So would you say that's one of the biggest lessons you took away from track, the ability to just exist and not really care about how other people may perceive you or think about you?
I have a bunch, but but for that one, that is one of the lessons track and field has definitely taught me, just to stay in your lane. No pun intended.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Run your race.
Run your race. Yeah, you can apply that with everything in life.
And at the Project Transition Mentorship Program, what we're trying to do is really help kids gain these skills of, you know, being good students, but also being good workers. And a lot of kids, they get nervous with the idea of just giving a presentation. I know for me growing up, it was like, oh, okay, no big deal. Just go up in front of the class, say what you want to say, get it over with, sit down. But that can be nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So do you think just sports in general, they're good for, you know, kind of pushing kids out of their comfort zone and getting them, you know, used to doing things that they may not do often?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely good to it builds confidence for sure.
Yes.
You know, like even if you don't win a race or if you don't win a tennis match or whatever, it builds the confidence for you, for that individual to know like, hey, you know what? I wasn't sure about it, but I went out there and I did it, you know? And it also teaches you about like, it's okay if things don't come to you right away. It's okay if you lose. It just matters like what you do after that. Are you going to get back up? As a pro athlete, people are going to say whatever, like, oh, you should have won this or what happened here. It builds thick skin and you learn from it. It also helps with like, okay, you know what, they're saying this, brush it off, get back up and try again. And we'll see. And we'll go from there. Because in the real world, that's kind of like what it is, you know, okay, you're applying for a job, you didn't get that. Do you just sit at home and cry about it? I mean, you can for a little bit. Give yourself a day or two. But then you put yourself back out there again. And that's something track and field definitely taught me. Another lesson track and field has taught me, like, just get back up there and just go out there and try again.
Overall, it sounds like you're happy with your track and field career, but you're happy with your professional career as well because you are able to do what you want to do, but you have the skills from track and field to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
As you are right now, do you have any like future goals, future things you want to accomplish? Like, do you ever see yourself returning to track and field to coach or any of that?
Ooh, no, probably not. If anything,
Okay.
a spectator. Me coaching,
Okay.
I just know the pain of an athlete. So if they're like, I can't hit another rep, I'm like, okay, I'll probably be the worst coach. If they tell me like, it hurts, all right, shut everything down. Let's go get ice cream. I'm sorry, I hurt you. I would be terrible as a coach because I would just be too empathetic and too nice. But if anything, probably a spectator just to watch and cheer my friends on or my future kids.
Yeah, that's interesting though, the transition of being a athlete that does those things to like knowing you'd be the coach to be like, hey, take a break. It's okay.
Right.
We don't push yourself because with your experience, you know how bad it could get.
Yeah.
So you may not be a good coach, but that is a good thing that is good to have. It humanizes you a bit.
Yeah.
So moving forward, how should people contact you if they would like to, learn more about you and what you're doing?
For the unofficial route, follow me on IG. Shoot me a message. PhillyPhil_88. I respond to it all the time.
Your journey is just amazing to go from 10 and it feeling like a chore to where you are now. Just with all of this entire timeline, what advice would you give to, someone who is competing at the collegiate level that had like the same journey as you, started young in the collegiate level now? What advice would you give them for their journey, but what advice would you give them for entering the workforce?
I would say make sure you figure out what you like to do early on. I think that's very imperative because track will propel you at least a little bit further ahead than I would say most kids or college students or even young adults or adults at that age. I think it'll open the doors a lot faster and it can actually bring a lot of exposure to that person. But you have to figure out what you like to do. If track is what you like to do, think about, an exit plan. I don't care if you're like 19, I think it's best to think of an exit plan because you never know when you might hurt your toe or something would happen, and you don't want to be towards the latter part of your career where money isn't flowing in as it was and you're not getting the same recognition and you're trying to figure out what you want to do. Nothing wrong with that. It's just you might meet some roadblocks and it might be a little bit harder for you to get the ball rolling rather than when you're young and things are flowing in. I even suggested to some younger athletes, why don't you just take a part-time job? You got a lot of time. We train like 3-4 hours out of the day. Get a part-time job and something that you like. So this way you kind of like keep yourself busy and you know what you like to do, because with track and field training, there's a lot of idle time, especially in the fall training where we're just doing a lot of miles and just a lot of miles, and you're not traveling. You don't have to worry about going or spending a month in Europe. You just home.
Like Dr. Wallace says, you want to be proactive, not reactive.
You
want to get some kind of a plan in place.
Yes.
Growing up, I never understood why he said that, but now being an adult, I understand why he said that now. So,
yes.
And then just moving forward, do you have anything exciting on your horizon that you're just looking forward? I mean, are you like looking forward to watching the next Olympics? Anything that's not track related?
Oh my gosh, so many things that are exciting, actually. A few, but to touch on it, the Olympics games in Paris is going to be fun to watch. So I can't wait. I have some friends that are going to be competing there. So it's going to be exciting. And my new projects and other ventures that I'm working on as well, too, that I'm keeping hush-hush and I won't release until the beginning of 2024. So there's lots of things to be excited about.
When you look back at 10-year-old Phyllis and just where you are now, would you say you're proud of yourself? Because I'm proud of you. Would you say you're proud of yourself?
Yeah, I would. I would, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and with me. I really appreciate it. To everyone who's watching, thank you so much. We should have other interviews coming soon, I'm pretty sure. Thank you so much. This was my interview with Phyllis Francis for Project Transition.
Oh, thank you,
Thank
Kendall, for
you.
having me. You were such a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you so much.